Listen, you're about to hear something so absurd, so completely ridiculous, that the Galactic Council themselves would laugh me out of the observatory. But I'm telling you this anyway, because someone needs to document what happened before the entire education system gets wiped from the records. My name is Kyrax Vennor, and I was the most respected xenobiology instructor at the Andromeda Institute of Interspecies Learning. Was, past tense. Everything changed the moment a Deathworlder walked into my classroom with what looked like a perfectly ordinary mammal on a leash. Now you need to understand something about Deathworlders. These humans, these creatures from the planet Earth, they're absolutely insane, not metaphorically, literally crazy. The fact that they survived their own planet is proof that natural selection doesn't work the way it's supposed to. Their homeworld should have killed them 17 times over, yet here they are thriving, multiplying, and worst of all, traveling through space, like they own the galaxy. And they brought their weird little companions with them. The day everything fell apart started like any other rotation. I was preparing my lecture on comparative exobiology to my classroom of 30 students. We had Selvat, our resident aquatic species with tentacles that worked better than any hands. We had the Krell twins, silicon-based life forms who communicated through vibrations. We had Mira, a crystalline being from the outer rings, and we had Marcus and Keisha, two humans who'd been integrated into our institution as cultural ambassadors. I should have known something was wrong when Marcus walked in with that particular smile on his face. That smile. The one humans get right before they do something completely unpredictable and potentially catastrophic. Professor Kyrax, Marcus said, his voice dripping with false innocence, we have a special presentation today for your class. Behind him, Keisha wheeled in what appeared to be a small furry creature with 4 legs, a tail, and an expression that could only be described as mischievous beyond measure. It was a dog. A golden retriever, to be precise, named Bailey. Now, I'd seen Earth animals before. They were usually contained, monitored, and kept at safe distances from normal civilization. This one looked like it had already destroyed at least 2 different spaceships, based on the random dust particles in its fur. That is a canine from Earth, I stated, my antenna twitching with barely concealed alarm. A known hazard to organized society. Why is it in my classroom? Bailey isn't just any dog, Keisha explained, her eyes sparkling with the kind of enthusiasm that usually preceded disaster. She's been trained in advanced problem-solving, communication theory, and emotional intelligence. We thought she could demonstrate how Deathworlders implement knowledge transfer through companionship. The Selvat immediately retracted 3 tentacles. The Krell twins stopped vibrating. Everyone in the room knew this was going sideways faster than a comet on a collision course. Absolutely not, I said, using my most authoritative tone. This classroom operates under strict scientific protocols. Animals, particularly ones from a death world, are unpredictable variables that contaminate data. Bailey barked. Just once. But it was the bark of something that had no respect for authority, protocol, or the established order of the galaxy. It was a bark that said, "Your rules mean nothing to me, alien." I should have paid attention to that bark. We've already cleared this with the administration, Marcus said, pulling out a document that was somehow already approved with the headmaster's signature. When did that happen? How was the paperwork already processed? Bailey is officially enrolled as an experimental student. She'll be participating in all your lectures on behavioral adaptation and species interaction. This is highly irregular, I protested. But even I could hear the weakness in my argument. The paperwork was legitimate. The signatures were authentic. Somehow the Deathworlders had already won this battle before I even knew we were fighting. Bailey trotted into the middle of the classroom with the confidence of a creature that had survived living on a planet where everything was trying to kill it. She didn't sit. She didn't stand at attention. She simply walked to the front of the room, placed her paws on my lecture desk, and looked directly at me. She's ready to learn, Keisha announced. What happened next should have been recorded as a historical event. Bailey, this small Earth canine, proceeded to solve a complex problem posed by the Selvat in exactly the way a mathematician would approach it, not through calculation, through intuition. She understood the elegant simplicity that so many advanced species overlooked because their minds were too sophisticated. Her brain had apparently evolved to recognize patterns that confounded creatures with processing power that could calculate the positions of stars decades in advance. The class went silent. The Krell twins increased their vibration frequency. Even Mira seemed to shift her internal color patterns in surprise. "How is this possible?" one of the younger students asked. "Deathworlders are apex predators," I heard myself saying, even as my mind screamed that this was absurd. "They evolved to survive impossible odds. That kind of evolutionary pressure, it doesn't just create physical strength. It creates adaptability, cunning, problem-solving abilities that conventional biology shouldn't allow." Bailey barked again, and this time it sounded like laughter. Over the next several rotations, something extraordinary and completely terrifying began to happen. Bailey wasn't alone. More Deathworlders started arriving with their animals. Dogs, cats, even a parrot that could recite Salvat mathematics better than half my advanced students. Each one was different. Each one brought something unique to the classroom. But more importantly, each one started changing how my students thought. The Krell twins became obsessed with studying how a dog's sense of smell worked. They theorized that this basic sensory ability could revolutionize their mineral detection systems. The Salvat began comparing how dogs navigated three-dimensional spaces to how they maneuvered through water currents. Even Mira started analyzing the crystalline structure of dog teeth, which apparently held mathematical properties she'd never considered before. I watched, horrified and fascinated, as these ridiculous creatures from a ridiculous death world gradually took over my classroom. They didn't force anything. They didn't impose themselves through violence or domination. They did something far more dangerous. They made learning from death world companions seem valuable, essential, even revolutionary. By the end of the third rotation, I had a waiting list of 700 students from across the galaxy requesting enrollment in my classes. Not for my expertise, for the privilege of learning alongside these impossible creatures from the impossible planet. And Bailey, that ridiculous golden-furred mammal, was now officially the assistant professor. The administration was thrilled. The council was fascinated. Everyone wanted to know how this had happened, how Deathworlders had somehow inverted the entire educational hierarchy of the galaxy with nothing but enthusiasm, loyalty, and an ability to understand complex ideas through what could only be described as the application of ancient Earth wisdom. I alone understood the terrifying truth. We hadn't invited them in. They had already won. The real trouble was just beginning. The trouble started small, too small. That's how I should have known it was intentional. First, the supply requisitions began disappearing. Not lost, mind you. Redirected. Every request for advanced learning materials suddenly got rerouted to Bailey's special project room. Then the scheduling algorithms mysteriously glitched, leaving the largest auditorium available only when Marcus and Keisha needed it for their so-called demonstration events. When I complained to the administration, they looked at me like I was the one being unreasonable. Professor Kyrax, the headmaster, said, his crystalline form flickering with what might have been amusement or contempt. Hard to tell with beings made of minerals. The Earth Companions program has generated unprecedented interest galaxy-wide. Your enrollment numbers have tripled. Your funding has quintupled. Surely you're not suggesting we reduce support for what is clearly the most successful educational initiative in our institution's history. I wanted to scream. I wanted to explain that this wasn't success. This was infiltration wearing the mask of academic progress. But the numbers didn't lie. Thousands of students from hundreds of species were now attending classes specifically because they wanted to study alongside Earth animals. We'd gone from a respectable mid-tier educational facility to the most prestigious institute in the known galaxy. All because of dogs and cats and one impossibly intelligent parrot named Professor Squawk. By the fifth rotation, things had escalated beyond simple administrative manipulation. The animals had started teaching independently. Bailey now held office hours. The parrot was conducting seminars on linguistic theory. A tabby cat named Whiskers had somehow become an expert in quantum mechanics and was drawing a standing room-only crowd to her lectures twice a rotation. I attended one of Whiskers' presentations, ostensibly to gather evidence of impropriety. What I found instead was that she was genuinely revolutionary in her approach. She didn't explain quantum mechanics through mathematical frameworks. She explained it through the concept of superposition applied to hunting decisions. A prey animal exists in multiple states until observed. A predator exists in multiple tactical positions until commitment occurs. The entire universe operates on the same principle. The students lost their minds. 3 Solvat collapsed from the emotional weight of understanding. A Krell twin vibrated so intensely it had to be sedated. Even I felt something shift in my comprehension, and I've studied astrophysics for 200 cycles. That's when I realized the horrifying truth. These weren't just trained animals participating in education. They were systematically redesigning how the entire galaxy thought. The next morning I tried to contact Marcus and Keisha directly. I found them in what used to be the faculty break room. It had been converted into what could only be described as a war room. Documents covered every surface. Holographic projections displayed enrollment charts, species demographics, and something that looked suspiciously like a strategic organizational structure. "You're planning something," I said, not bothering with pleasantries. Pleasantries were useless now. Keisha looked up from a tablet displaying what appeared to be a 17-point expansion plan. "Planning, Professor. We're not planning. We're executing. There's a difference." "This is coordination," Marcus added, gesturing to the chaos around them. "Humanity has spent thousands of years learning that our greatest strength isn't individual capability, it's our ability to work together. And when you combine that with the loyalty and intuition our animal companions bring, you create something unprecedented. You're taking over the educational system," I practically shouted. "We're not taking anything," Keisha replied calmly. "We're offering something your species genuinely wants. Knowledge delivered through a lens you'd never considered. Progress powered by perspective shift. The question isn't whether we're taking over. The question is, why are you all so desperate to be led?" That question haunted me, because she was right. Nobody was forcing attendance at these classes. Students were demanding spots. Families across the galaxy were enrolling their offspring specifically to study under-Earth animals. The demand had become so overwhelming that other institutions were starting their own programs, desperately trying to replicate what was happening here. I tried to alert the Galactic Council. I submitted reports. I requested emergency sessions. I even appeared in person before the governing body to warn them about what I'd witnessed. Their response was infuriatingly predictable. They wanted to study the phenomenon further. They wanted to expand the program. They wanted to invest massive resources into spreading this revolution across the entire known galaxy. "You don't understand," I pleaded. "This is cultural imperialism wrapped in the language of education. This is evolution," one of the council members replied. It was a Vex, a species known for being intellectually superior but emotionally hollow. "Your students are learning better. Your research output has increased. Your institution is attracting talent from every corner of the galactic community. You're experiencing success on a scale your species has never achieved, and you want to end it? Why? Because success built on infiltration is just conquest wearing a friendly face." But I didn't say that. I just stood there, watching them vote unanimously to accelerate the program. By the 10th rotation, the situation had completely spiraled into something beyond my capacity to control or even comprehend. A German shepherd, named Colonel, worked as a tactical advisor for the military institute 3 systems over. A rabbit somehow became the lead researcher in genetic engineering. Even a goldfish contributed to breakthroughs in fluid dynamics just by existing and swimming in specific patterns. The animals weren't replacing our experts. They were complementing them. They were offering different cognitive approaches to problems that had stymied advanced species for centuries. And because they worked through instinct and intuition rather than pure calculation, Their solutions were often more elegant than anything our greatest minds had produced. The truly terrifying part: they were right. Their way worked better. I found Bailey in the grand auditorium one evening, watching sunset through the observation deck. 7,000 seats surrounded us, all empty now. She sat there, golden fur catching the light, completely at ease in this monument to galactic learning. "You know what you've done?" I asked, standing in the shadows so she couldn't see how much I was trembling. Bailey turned toward my voice. Her tongue lolled out in what could have been interpreted as a smile or a smirk, hard to tell with her species. "My kind doesn't overthink things the way you do," Bailey said. Her translator collar rendered her bark into words that were somehow both perfectly clear and completely infuriating. "Humans brought us with them because we're useful, we're loyal. We understand complex social structures without needing it explained through equations. But more than that, we showed your galaxy that learning doesn't have to be complicated. It just has to be genuine. You've destroyed the hierarchy of knowledge," I said. "You've made irrelevant the traditions, the methodologies, the entire framework that made sense of the universe." "No," Bailey replied, standing and moving toward me with unsettling confidence. "We've just proven that there's more than one way to understand it. Your framework still works. Ours just works better for some problems. The galaxy is learning that different minds approach different questions differently. That's not destruction, Kyrax. That's growth." She was right, and I hated her for it. Within 3 more rotations, the transformation was complete. Deathworlders and their animal companions held positions in every major research facility across known space. They didn't rule through force or law. They ruled through relevance. They'd made themselves so valuable that opposition seemed almost petty, almost foolish. The Galactic Council appointed Bailey as the first non-governmental advisor on educational policy. Marcus and Keisha became ambassadors of cultural integration. Whiskers was awarded the prestigious Stellar Prize for her contributions to quantum understanding. And me, I was offered early retirement with full honors, a brilliant academic whose institutional memory would be preserved. They didn't fire me. They didn't punish me. They just quietly sidelined me while the future crashed forward, at speeds I couldn't process. On my final rotation at the Institute, I stood in my office, packing the few personal items I'd accumulated over 2 centuries of teaching. The walls felt smaller than they'd ever been. The achievements that once made me proud now looked quaint, outdated, necessary only for historical context. Marcus knocked on my open door. He looked genuinely sympathetic, and that somehow made it worse. "You could have embraced this," he said quietly. "You could have adapted. Deathworlders are excellent at adaptation when we choose to be." "That's what terrifies me," I replied. "You're too adaptable. You could become anything, fill any role. Eventually you'll be necessary for everything." "Maybe that's not such a terrible thing," Marcus offered. I didn't answer. I just finished packing and left the institute that had been my life's work. As I walked through the corridors, I saw Bailey conducting a lecture to a crowded auditorium. Her voice was strong, her message was clear, and every species in that room was hanging on every word. The Deathworlders hadn't conquered the galaxy with weapons or words or violence. They'd conquered it with something far more powerful: loyalty, companionship, and the simple truth that sometimes the best solutions come from unexpected sources. They'd changed everything by asking us to learn differently, and the galaxy had said yes. I wonder sometimes if they planned this from the beginning, if that first moment Bailey walked into my classroom was calculated infiltration or genuine enthusiasm. But it doesn't matter anymore. The outcome is the same. The revolution succeeded without anyone realizing there was a war, and somehow that's the most beautiful victory of all.